Merry Christmas and happy holidays to ya. This is sort of like a part 2 of my Christmassy tutorials. This one's kind of like a text effect, sort of like, I don't know, like a candy text effect a little bit. It's got like a Christmas feel, holiday feel to it in Photoshop. So did one in Illustrator, now we got one in Photoshop. I've got a microphone hanging right here because I got a new like microphone arm. I don't know if this is where it's gonna go, but we'll see. Let's get into the tutorial. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is add a rectangle to our page. So I'm gonna go over to the rectangle tool, click on it, click and drag so that it covers our entire canvas, and there's our rectangle. Now we just have like a black color on this. It doesn't actually matter. I'm gonna click in this gray area to the right of that layer to add a gradient overlay to this rectangle. And we're gonna match the gradient overlay I had on the beginning version. And so I get a bunch of styles here. If I don't see gradient overlay, I can go to the FX panel, drop down, and find gradient overlay. Now I'm gonna check mark it, and it's probably gonna be the color we want already, and I'll just show you guys what this is here. Click on the gradient. We've got color from left to right. And if I double click on this color, there's my color that I chose. I simply chose it, kind of lighter blue color. Here's the hex code if you want to enter that in. And then on the right side, I also have another color blue. This one's a little bit darker, same thing. There's the hex code, hit OK. So we got this light blue to dark blue, and I adjusted the center a little bit, right? And so I added a little bit more of this light blue in there, and it kind of, it's almost like a vignette on the corners there with that dark blue. So I hit OK, and I got that in there. Now, opacity, I want that at 100%. If you reverse it, then your light blue is going to be on the outside, your dark blue on the inside. So I want the light blue on the inside, dark blue on the outside. Same thing with scale. You can sort of adjust that scale a little bit. Now I had that up there in the 130, 135 range, and that created a nice subtle gradient, I thought anyway. And so this is a radial gradient, by the way. That's the most important part there. You probably have to change that from linear to radial unless you want it left to right or right to left. Hit OK, and we have our background set up. So next I'm actually just going to lock this background in to make sure we don't accidentally change it. Just click that little lock icon, boom, background is locked. Let's add the text. I'm going to go over to my type tool. It's somewhere around here. The shortcut key for that is, of course, T. I'm going to type out here, and let's type in Xmas. And we're just going to bring this guy with the move tool to the center-ish. I can hit Command or Control A to select all, and with the move tool selected, I can center it up right here. Horizontal, vertical, boom, it's centered. And then I'm going to hit Command or Control D to deselect. Goodbye marching ants. Command or Control T, as long as this layer is selected, will transform that layer, and I can grab a corner and just hold Alt or Option. I'm still getting used to the new scale tool. You don't have to hold Shift anymore, just Alt or Option, and we can kind of scale him in there. Hit Return or Enter, and it places that text in there. So we have our text, our Xmas text. This could be anything you want, really. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's just text, and it's still editable. We're gonna add some layer styles to that text. So let's double click, same thing we did with the rectangle, in this little gray space, open up the layer styles. First up, Bevel and Emboss. Now I already have it sort of set up. It's a nice soft sort of bevel. It's an inner bevel style, smooth technique. The depth, 84, 85%, kind of depends on the size of your document. My document is 1920 by 1080. That's the size of my canvas. And then of course you have whether it's up or down. I liked up, kind of makes it 3D text. The size and the softness, mine is 24 and 4. You guys can kind of play with this, create the look that you want. You can also adjust the angle of the light. I've got mine set at 136, and I actually have that set as a global light, so everything that uses the angle is going to have that angle when global light is checked. From this, it's altitude, the screen, the shadow, you know, how dark do you want that shadow to show up? I don't even remember what I had that at, maybe like 40%. It's really not a perfect science. It's kind of like how you feel about how it looks on your page. Okay, we don't have to actually leave this layer style panel. We're gonna add multiple layer styles to our text, and we have more to add here. One of them that I can add, it sort of adds what I think is kind of like a rim light, so like a light around the edge, is a stroke around the entire piece. It also softens these corners so that they're not quite as harsh on this text. By the way, this font is Macho and can be found in the type kit as a syncable font. Syncable? Is that a word? Anyway, let's add a stroke just by clicking on stroke. Remember, any of these effects are in the effects dropdown if you don't see them in this list. So we're adding a stroke. On my canvas here, I'm adding a 3-point stroke, and the position I'm adding it is outside. So it's gonna add that stroke to the outside of my text. The blend mode, normal, opacity, I have it at 100%, but I don't just have it as a pure white. You see, if I have it as a pure white, it's almost too harsh in my opinion. So I try to find what works with this text, and I kind of brought that down a little bit into this grayish tone. And once I had that where it sort of blended on the shadow side in spots, and then kind of highlighted the edges on the well, the not shadow side, maybe that's the highlight side, you know what I'm talking about. I just kind of pulled it back a little bit. Okay, so we had the stroke. I believe what we need to add next is a pattern. Yeah, a pattern to this. So I'm going to add a pattern overlay, and I don't want that one, although there are lots of options you can add here. I believe I want this one here, which is going to add a bit of like a grittiness texture. I kind of felt like it looked like snow a little bit. Maybe these letters are made out of snow. It just reminded me of winter more than anything. I can adjust the scale of this. So as you adjust this up, you can make the scale bigger so you can kind of blow it up, or you can make it smaller. Now, the smaller it goes, you might start to see some of the patterning in it. The larger it goes, it's gonna get way, way blurry. So I wouldn't recommend going too large with that. It's not a perfect scale. So I'm gonna increase it a little bit just so you guys can probably really see it on this tutorial specifically. So mine's at 168, we'll make it 175, so it's just a nice number for you guys if you're following along exactly. Now we don't wanna add the drop shadow yet, we'll actually add that layer. These are later, not layer. These are all the effects that you actually need to add to the text itself. So I'm gonna hit OK. Now if you wanted to, you could still edit this completely and make it say whatever you want, as close to finalizing it as you can. But what we want to do now is actually just take this text layer and make a smart object out of it. So as long as this layer is selected, I can right click on it and go up to, we'll find it here, hang on, something, convert to smart object, there it is. Convert to smart object. Now this is not directly editable now. I actually have to go inside of that smart object, and what Photoshop just did was it took all of those elements and put them inside of another Photoshop file, and then I've embedded it into here. So it's still editable, but we can sort of work with this in a better way now. And the biggest reason is when we add that pattern overlay, it's gonna override any sort of color that we put on top of this, and we don't want that to happen. So to get around that, we make it a smart object. I can still edit this text by double clicking on this smart object thumbnail, and it's going to open up as if it's another Photoshop document, and it technically is. And so I've got two Photoshop documents open, right? I've got the working Photoshop document. I just double clicked on my smart layer, so I have, or my smart object, so I have this smart object document as well. What I recommend here is we go ahead, and before we even do anything, we go up to image on our smart object, and we go to canvas size, and we make this the exact same canvas size that your original document is. So 1920 by 1080 is my canvas size. Hit OK, and now if we zoom out with Command or Control minus, we have a replica sized document. The reason I did this was so I know when I'm making adjustments to text, like if I wanted to add like a little subline down here, that text I can add here and know exactly how it's going to look on my final composition. Generally, smart objects just sort of clip it to the size of whatever the object is. I made that a little bit bigger. So from here, I'm pretty sure we're done with the text, and we can just Command or Control S to save. Notice this little star, that means it's not saved. So I'm going to Command or Control S, that saves that smart object, and I can actually just exit out of it if I want to and go back to here. So if you made any changes, they will reflect if you save that and then come back to this main document. Okay, so what I want to do now is add our stripes. Pretty simple way I'm going to do this. Let's add a folder, and we're going to double click on this folder name and change it to stripes. And then we're just going to add a bunch of rectangles. So click on the rectangle tool. It doesn't really matter the color, and start making rectangles that scale from the left to the right side of your canvas. They don't have to be perfect, but you can sort of size them now. Even though we'll be able to edit that later, you can kind of size them now. Once I have one rectangle created, I can go back to the move tool, and just as long as this rectangle is selected, I can hold Option or Alt and bring this guy down and start to create a bunch of rectangle duplicates right here. You'll see my layer panel to the right keeps adding all those rectangles, and they don't have to be perfectly spaced apart. Just create as many as you think you want, and I'm going to create one more here just like that. Now what we want to do is perfectly space them apart, and to do that I'm going to select all these rectangles. So click on the top rectangle, hold Shift, and click on the bottom rectangle. If they are not in your folder, you can right now click and drag them all into that folder, but mine already are. What I want to do here with the move tool selected, I actually have some options up here, but I don't have the ones I want. I need to click these little 3 ellipses, and that's going to drop down more options for my alignment panel. The one that I want is distribute, and specifically distribute vertical centers. Once I click that, notice how all my rectangles align to each other, and we want to align to selection, by the way. So click that, and they're all spaced out evenly now. That's what I wanted to do there. Now once all these rectangles are created, I'm going to minimize this folder by clicking the little drop down arrow, and I've got them all in this folder. I can hide them, show them, just like that. Right click on this layer, and we're going to convert that to a smart object as well. So now we've got a smart object. We can double click into that. We've got all of our rectangles here. What I want to do to inside of this smart object, I can't talk. What I want to do in this inside of this smart object is add a color overlay. So I'm going to double click in this space, add a layer style. This layer style is going to be a color overlay. Now this color overlay, blend mode, normal, opacity 100%, is going to be the color of your stripes. So if I click on this here, I can go up to the red somewhere and add that sort of reddish color and hit OK. Hit OK again, and now we have red colored stripes. Command or Control S to save. I'm going to exit out of this, and there we go. We have our red stripes in there. Now to lock them in to the letters only, we need to create a little clipping mask. To do that, I can hold Option or Alt on a PC and kind of hover between my stripes layer and my text layer here, my 2 smart objects, and this little icon appears. If I click, it creates a clipping mask. So now my rectangles are clipped to the text layer, and whatever changes I make to the text layer are still editable for these rectangles. Okay, so what I want to do with these guys, these stripes, is change the blending opacity to multiply, so it brings a lot of that texture in. And once we have that, the last thing I'm going to do, I got a couple more things. I'm going to rotate them. So I don't like them being like window blinds here. So I'm going to do Command T or Control T to grab those and rotate them. And I'm pretty sure I want them to look something like this, maybe, like that. Hit Enter. Now we've reached the bounds of our stripes, right? So that's the 2 edges. It's like we don't have enough stripes. If you like, let's say you like the spacing and the size of your stripes here, because I almost kind of do. There's 2 things you can do. I'm going to Command or Control minus to zoom out a little bit. First thing you can do, the easiest way to solve this is to just transform this stripe layer again, Command or Control T, and we can just grab an edge and we can scale it out. I can hold Option or Alt to scale from the center. I can just scale that out to make sure it covers all of my text, just like that, and I can hit Return or Enter, and that places it in there. That's one way to do it, but it scales up everything. So if I Command or Control Z, and maybe I like the sort of skinnier stripes just like this, and I actually kind of do. So I'm going to go back into my little smart object, back into my stripes smart object. I need to create more stripes on top and bottom here. So I'm going to go up to image canvas size and create more height space. And I'm going to do 2000. I'm just going to make sure I have enough space. Hit OK. And now I've got more headroom here. I'm going to zoom out, Command or Control minus. And there's plenty of stripes here. So what I'm going to do is drop these down, select all of them. That way I can move them all at once. I'm going to move them down. I'm going to hold shift as well just to keep them in line. I'm going to move them down to here, just like that. Now I'm going to hold Alt or Option and duplicate this entire set of stripes. I'm going to hold shift as well while I do this. And I'm just going to put them up here like that. And then I don't just want to eyeball that spacing. So I need to select every single stripe now, every rectangle. So click on the top rectangle, scroll down, shift click the bottom one. Every rectangle is selected. Select the move tool. And remember those 3 ellipses? We got to distribute them. Make sure you're aligning to selection. Distribute vertical centers. And I adjusted them just a little bit there, but now I know they're perfectly spaced. I can Command S to save this, or Control S, remember, on a PC. Exit out of that. And now I have way more stripes to utilize here. And these stripes, they're clipped to the Xmas text. I can still move them around. So I can position these to exactly where I want them to be by either clicking and dragging or using my left and right arrow keys. Hold shift for bigger steps with those, like super nudges. All right, I'm gonna add a little bit extra here on these stripes. So I'm gonna zoom in, Command or Control plus. I'm gonna add like a little bit that makes it look like the stripes are almost a little bit 3D. That's with the bevel and emboss again. So double click out here on this blank space, add a little bevel and emboss. What I have added here is way too much. So we need to bring this back. I'm not sure which numbers are. We're gonna bring back soften first. Okay, that doesn't do much, but oh, there we go. The size is big, and also probably the depth as well. So I only want a little bit of depth there. Inner bevel and smooth is fine. And then I want to bring back the softness some, and definitely bring back the size. And then once I have it here, I think I want to show a little bit more of the shadow here. So shadow mode, opacity, bring that up, and maybe a little bit less of the highlight. And then I can sort of play with these a little bit. Might bring back the shadows a little bit more until we get something in here. 5 pixels, maybe 6 pixels, 7, 6, something like that, just to give it a little bit of a lip right on there. And that sort of adds to the effect that the stripes are actually a physical layer on top of my text. Now I think the last thing we want to add here is a little drop shadow on the whole thing. So this whole smart object that includes the text. If I double click in this area out here, we've done this the whole tutorial. We go down to drop shadow, and we're going to add that. And you can customize this drop shadow. So the opacity is first. How dark is this? How transparent is it? And then you can adjust the sizing, which is generally the blur, if you want to think about that. The distance helps, or the distance is easy to think about, right? It's the distance away from my object. And then spread is sort of like, it's sort of like how thick it is a little bit. I don't know how to describe it, but just play with these 3 settings until you get a drop shadow that you're happy with. So if you need to add a little bit more into it, you can use that spread. If you need to blur it a little more, use the size until you get something that you like. Hit OK, and boy, I think there it is. Now we have the rectangle, we have Christmas, we have stripes. So let's say you want to change. Let's say you want to edit this text. What you want to do is double click on the Xmas part, and I want to change this and say candy again, right? I can do that. And the reason, the good thing is I know that on this document I'm going to hit the edges, so already I can take this candy and Command or Control T and then sort of scale it down a little bit, right? Hit enter. Now I know it's going to fit in my canvas of my other document because we made this the same size. So Command or Control S to save that. We can go back to our working document, and there's candy. That probably makes a lot more sense. It does look like candy to me. I don't know. What do you think? Let me think if there's anything else I want to talk to you about. So you can move the stripes around just like this. They're clipped to that candy layer. or the Xmas text layer. You can create as many lines of text as you want. And you can adjust that background gradient if you want to. You can always double click on any of these effects to adjust them. If you have it locked, you won't be able to, so then I can double click on that and I can adjust anything I want here. That's pretty much it. So I would love to see your guys' renditions of the effect, and maybe you're using it in a totally different way than what I might think. Maybe it's not even a Christmas effect. But I hope you guys learned a lot in this tutorial. If you have any questions, I think I covered everything, but I'm not entirely sure. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more tips and tutorials. Have a happy holidays. I'll see you guys in the next one.